For the vast majority of us in the Western world, the music we're familiar with is built on the same, seemingly simple building blocks, the 12-tone equal temperament scale. You might recognize it like this. But behind this concept of music that many of us take for granted lies a surprising amount of science and math, the science of tuning systems. This science stems from the study of acoustics, and, like any science, is full of varied and interesting theories. And, while my poor composer brain hurts trying to do any math above counting to 4, there are composers and scientists who want to explore the different possibilities that exist. The Xenharmonic Wiki is a major resource for those people who might be interested in the complexities of non-12-tone equal temperament tuning, and in fact does include the mathematical reasoning, theory, and explanation of 12-tone equal temperament. Which can be a useful place to begin for those of us who may need some help understanding the concepts and topics being discussed, like myself. But it can be very confusing should you start there with no primer. The web page starts on the home page, which is also the About page, so clicking on the About Xenharmonic Wiki link on the bottom of the page just brings you right back to the page. The Xenharmonic Wiki bills itself as an open resource for information about musical tuning. This includes information about systems of tuning, the relationships between those systems, and the theory and math behind them. And right off the bat, there are a fair number of directions to head. Any word or phrase that is blue, or purple if it's already been clicked, is a link to another page, much like Wikipedia or any other wiki functions. And of course, the search function can lead you to more information on anything specific that you can think of. For our little tour, we'll follow the course I found most logical, and if at any point you disagree with me, feel free to leave a comment down below and tell me what you think. To best understand what is being discussed here on the Xenharmonic Wiki, I wanted to familiarize myself with the basics. This started by exploring the definition of musical tuning that was being used, which led me to the tuning system page. The definition given for tuning system reads as such. A musical tuning system or interval system, commonly referred to as a tuning or system, is a set of rules or algorithms, including enumeration, that gives all the notes or intervals theoretically available to a composer. Interestingly enough, they have a link on this page to the Wikipedia page on musical tuning, so let's contrast this definition with the one presented on the Wikipedia page. A tuning system is the system used to define which tones, or pitches, to use when playing music. In other words, it is the choice of number and spacing of frequency values used. I find it interesting, though not unexpected, that the Xenharmonic Wiki's definition makes a fascinating distinction in the second line of their description. The qualification theoretically is important, as such systems are typically defined or definable in the abstract, not taking into account the practical constraints of human hearing or the ability to actually produce all the pitches of the system, though it could involve the decision of what fundamental frequencies the notes of all instruments will be tuned to. The Xenharmonic Wiki makes a point to distinguish that scales can be entirely theoretical, and even impossible for the human ear to properly distinguish between the steps of. The last thing of note on this page was the section titled Open and Closed Systems, which defines open and closed systems. Defined by a man named Gene Ward Smith, who was apparently something of a giant in the world of microtonal tuning before his death in 2021, open and closed systems are considered the most basic distinction between tuning systems. A closed system is a tuning system with a finite number of possible intervals, while an open system would have an infinite amount. Already we're beginning to run into terminology and math that I'm unfamiliar with, so feel free to check out the Xenharmonic Wiki yourself if you should happen to see something that piques your interest. Once you're done watching this video, of course. Going back to the main page, I felt the best way to get a feeling for a new website is to simply explore the links that they've made the easiest to find. The start to that? The introduction, of course. I was expecting to find something along the lines of what I found during my exploration of the music notation project. A page explaining kind of the history and story of what caused this page to pop up. Instead, this page is to the point, giving you the tools to begin editing and contributing to the wiki. Their mission statement is pretty prominently displayed as well. It's about Xenharmonic and microtonal music. As they say, this field is many things to many people. We have a guide for learning about tunings on the internet, and a few different takes on some common misconceptions encountered in microtonal studies. The pages on the left will eventually get you to most pages on the wiki, but there is also the recent changes page and the index of all pages. General theory is a good place to start your reading. Feel free to ask questions and provide your own answers as you learn about microtonality. Alright, sounds like we've got the next place to explore.
Like general knowledge.
General knowledge?
So, general theory isn't actually really a page on theory. It's more of a hub, full of links to pages. As the page says, here are some links to some of the key ideas underlying tuning. And yeah, there are some links here, alright. But we're kind of on our own at this point, without any further recommendations on where to head. So I fell back on an old favorite of mine. Music notation. And, unsurprisingly, this is another kind of hub, links upon links, yet again. There's a fair bit here, but we're not any closer to finding some new information. However, I could easily be persuaded to come back here and look at all of these again, because, like I said, music notation is a bit of an interest of mine. Let's try another link on the general theory page. Alright, second time was the charm. Welcome to interval. Things start out good, very easy to understand. An interval is the difference in pitch between two notes. Since two notes form a dyad, the terms interval and dyad are sometimes used interchangeably. Human pitch perception is logarithmic, therefore an interval can be described with a frequency ratio or a logarithmic measure of that ratio, such as sense. Alright, good stuff, making sense so far. Yeah, and you've lost me. That's for sure. I only vaguely know what a logarithm is, and the logic mathy stuff going on here, way over my head. There's a section here on the homepage titled, If You're New to Musical Tuning, and the first link is, Why Use Alternative Tunings? This should be safe. And yeah, this is way easier to approach. So let's see the 7 main reasons people might explore alternative tuning. Number 1, for something new. 99.9% of music heard in the Western world has one thing in common. The same 12 notes, and thus, the same available chords, chord progressions, and scales. Alternative tunings offer an infinite number of all of those things, with as many, or as few, notes as you want, in whatever relationships to each other that you want. Using only 12-tone equal temperament in spite of so many other tunings is analogous to only using the major scale, in spite of other modes like Aeolian, Mixolydian, Dorian, etc. This is a fair reason, in my opinion. You hear it pretty often as a composer. People going, how are we supposed to keep making new music and interesting music with only the same 12 notes? Of course, I never really bought into that because, there is in essence more than just 12 notes. But this is a good way to kind of skirt around that concern and go, look, we don't need to worry about that. Number 2, for harmonic purity, or not. For various historical and practical reasons, the standard Western tuning is arguably out of tune, based on our perception of consonants. For example, the major third is 13 cents sharper than pure, and the minor third is 15 cents flatter. There are also pure intervals that the 12 equal divisions of the octave does not even come close to approximating, intervals most people have never heard in or out of tune before. These purer, more in tune harmonies provide a desirable sonic quality. and alternative tunings give you access to these pure harmonies. There are also much more dissonant intervals than those that exist in standard Western tuning, and alternative tunings can give one access to those as well. I'll admit that this one isn't one that I fully understand. I'm very accustomed, as I'm sure most people are, to the 12-tone equal temperament system, so I really don't hear those intervals as out of tune. Though, while thinking on it, I've always found it fascinating how different just intonation music can sound, like the works of Ben Johnston or even barbershop music. So I think I can understand this argument, at least partially. 3. For new melodies. The scales available in 12 equal divisions of the octave are relatively few. Most commonly, musicians will use one of two modes of the diatonic scale. If you want, you can play in tunings that have structures similar to those in 12 equal divisions of the octave, but have them tuned differently so that, for instance, the difference between major and minor becomes more or less pronounced. There are many other possible scales, however, and most of them are completely unsupported by our standard 12 notes. While our diatonic scale is defined by 5 large steps and 2 small ones, there are other scales defined by any combination of large and small step sizes. For example, 4 large and 3 steps defines what's referred to as a Hansen scale, and 2 large and 5 small steps defines what's referred to as a Mavila scale. Some scales are not defined by number of step sizes at all, and instead are derived by including the purest, most in-tune harmonies. These scales tend to have very irregular melodic spacing, which gives a completely different feel. Of course, these are just 2 of an infinite number of possible approaches to creating scales with new melodic structures, all of which would be impossible to play in standard Western tuning. To be very honest, this one feels very similar to the first argument. It boils down to more possibilities than just Western 12-tone equal temperament. I guess I feel that this is kind of implied in the first argument, so I'm a little confused on why they felt it necessitated its own specific point, I should say. That does not mean I disagree with it, however. Number 4. For counterpoint. In 12 tones, it is not possible to lead the 2 voices forming a major third to a minor third by contrary motion. But this is possible in many tunings, including 24, 27, 31, or 34 equal divisions of the octave. To be quite honest, my mind was blown the first time I read this. Just like the idea of using contrary motion, which is when 2 voices move opposite of each other, to get to a minor third from a major third is just bonkers. Like, that goes against everything I understand as, 12-tone equal temperament composer, is that you should not be able to move outwards from a major third, which is larger than a minor third, to get to what is essentially a smaller interval. Though I think I can understand how it works in 31 tone, just based on my incredibly superficial understanding of it. Number 5. For historical purposes. It was only after the 1800s that 12-tone equal temperament became the ubiquitous tuning it is today. Before that, tuning was as much an artistic decision for a composer as any other. One could argue that music written in earlier time periods is most authentic when played in the tuning for which it was written, and that part of the music is lost in the standard Western tuning. One group of examples are the well-tempered, a class of tunings with 12 notes that are spaced unevenly. These tunings gave each key its own flavor, and that was the inspiration for Bach's well-tempered clavier, where each piece was written in each key to show off its unique properties. A precursor to well temperament was the mean tone system, a method of tuning that, by varying the tuning of all fifths in the tuning, including tunings like 19 or 31 equal divisions of the octave. Even before that, there was Pythagorean tuning, with thirds even more out of tune than those in our current standard tuning. These intervals were used as restless dissonances that resolved to more stable, pure intervals in that tuning, like fourths, fifths, and octaves. As you go back in history, you find more and more systems of tuning that fit the music of the time period. This is a neat point to me. I'm kind of interested in this one because when you read these old orchestration or composition textbooks or treatises, you'll kind of see them describe how each key has a different flavor. like they'll say in this point, and I've always kind of wondered how accurate that really is. And I understand now, that we talk about this in the modern sense, and it makes sense to me that, the 12-tone equal tuning would kind of get rid of those discrepancies. But I find it fascinating, yeah. Number 6, for cultural purposes. 12 equal divisions of the octave is not standard everywhere in the world. Other cultures have developed their own tuning systems, many of which cannot be approximated by 12-tone equal division of the octave. If one wants to authentically play the music of these other cultures, then one must emulate the tuning along with the instruments and style. Maqam, an Arabic musical style, uses the so-called neutral intervals that can't be approximated on Western instruments, because they are right in between the standard Western notes. Gamelan, an Indonesian ensemble and musical style, uses two separate tunings that both deviate drastically from Western tuning. One is close to 5 equal divisions of the octave, and the other is close to 9 equal divisions of the octave. Many African percussive marimba-like instruments use a tuning that is well approximated by 7 equal divisions of the octave. I, of course, will not be arguing against this point, not since my very impassioned rebuttal of Daniel J. Levitin's This Is Your Brain on Music, where I made this exact point several times, particularly when Levitin basically claimed that Arabic music actually uses a 12-tone equal temperament system. Really, close analysis reveals this, but he never reveals whose close analysis it was. If you haven't seen that review, I invite you to watch it after this, because I had a lot to say about that book, and the information it purported to accurately represent. Number 7, to temper out commas. In some cases, quirky tuning coincidences pop up. For instance, in standard Western tuning, adding 3 major thirds gets you an octave. We've already addressed that these thirds are out of tune, but if you want 3 major thirds to equal an octave, then 12 EDO is the tuning for you, because with pure thirds this would not be the case. There are many other tuning coincidents that require tunings other than 12 EDO. For example, if you want your minor third divided into 2 equal pieces, 12 EDO doesn't do it, but 16 EDO, among others, will. These coincidences are most often described in terms of just intonation, the classification of intervals by the ratio between the two frequencies that they're made of. The major third in 12 EDO can be described as a sharp version of the interval 4/5, and the octave can be described as a pure 2/1. When we say that 3 major thirds are equal to an octave, we are also saying the following. 5/4 to the third power is equal to 2/1, which is the same as saying the following. 128/125 is equal to 1/1. Small, close to 1/1 intervals like 128/125 are referred to as commas. When one equates a comma with 1-to-1, the unison, this is referred to as a tempering out the comma. By tempering out a comma, you are equating all intervals that differ by that comma, like 3 major thirds and the octave in the case of 128/125. After tempering out a comma, a sequence of intervals that normally takes you away from your tonic, either in just intonation or in another tuning that doesn't temper out your comma, can end on the same note you started on. This can be an inspiring compositional feature, and using it in this way is referred to as a comma pump. Yeah, no argument about this one. I barely understand it. So yeah. So, while I've given you my opinion on this, someone else actually posted a rebuttal to an earlier version of this page, which was titled, A Recovering Microtonalist's Critical Reaction to Why Microtonality. This rebuttal brought up some neat points about the original arguments, which don't seem to be overly different from the ones I presented above, and why those original arguments are kind of flawed. They do, however, bring up reasons that they feel are reasonable for pursuing microtonality, which they preface with this statement. With the above reasons debunked as thoroughly as I can, let me provide what I consider to be much better reasons for pursuing microtonality. Ones which require much less justification and are not tenuously anchored in objectivism by pseudoscientific ideas about musical psychology. Which I thought was pretty funny. What was even funnier was microtonalist's critical reaction to a recovering microtonalist's critical reaction to why microtonality, which was a fascinating read because it appeared different editors of the wiki were using it to have a conversation of sorts, but also they spelt microtonality wrong in the title, and that is pretty funny on a website that is essentially dedicated to microtonality. However, this critical reaction, in my opinion, brought up the best point to pursue microtonality. If you think it sounds good, and I mean, isn't that the whole point of music? We enjoy it. We think it sounds good. Honestly, I'm not sure why they need those 7 arguments on why use alternative tunings. Just paste, only do it if you think it sounds good across the top, and I think they'd be set. Alright, so we've discovered why we might want to stick around on this website. But, yet again, where do we go next? Luckily, in times like these, we have the sidebar. Now, we've already met our good friend the sidebar when we went looking for general theory. It's this fun little bar on the side of the page here, and it's got a lot of fun links. We're already familiar with the first one, the main page. This, believe it or not, brings you back to the main page. The next one, just as easy to understand and probably not very interesting to the average visitor to the page, is a list of recent edits to the wiki, which is not super important to the casual visitor. Now, third down, we get to the fun stuff. Oh yeah, we're talking about gambling.
Woo! Yeah, baby! That's what I've been waiting for.
Now, I think you could tell I had a little too much fun with this feature, but I genuinely think this is a neat one. Sometimes you get pages that seem like nonsense, which I think are SCL files, basically a type of file that's used for alternative scale tunings in different programs. And it's pretty popular because of how simple the files are and how easy they are to share, kind of, as you could tell from the fact that they're just pages on this wiki. So if you're playing with the random page button and hit on something that looks like this, that's fancy programming talk for a scale. You can plug that into your favorite retunable software instrument, and whammo! You've got yourself an instrument that can play that scale. Moving down to the next link on our friend the sidebar, we find the FAQ, the frequently asked questions. This is a neat page because I think, based on this text up here, this is supposed to be a place for people to essentially ask their questions and get answers from other contributors to the website. Most importantly, I was hoping for another clear path to follow here. With the top question, there's so much to read, where do I start? However, this just brings us back to the general theory page, so let's keep exploring the FAQ. Next up, the question, what are some different kinds of tuning systems that exist? Which is linked to the page, List of Approaches to Musical Tuning. There are a ton of links here, with some small descriptions. I was interested in the musical tradition section, specifically the ancient Greeks, because I had just finished a review of a book that attempted, and failed, to discuss a small amount of the ancient Greek musical theory. This link was interesting because instead of what I was expecting, it links to a normal page on Wikipedia. I'm not going to complain because, the page seems super in-depth, but I sure wasn't expecting the link to go to normal Wikipedia. Well, in general, things haven't been going how I've expected so far, so I just wanted to head somewhere else and just kind of see what happens. Like I've said before, I've got a lot of an interest in music notation, if you couldn't tell, or if you haven't seen some of my other videos. So the next stop on the sidebar was scores. Now, I love notating things. I love to write things down. Nothing is more fun than learning some new notational concepts or cleaning up a score. Okay? So this page simultaneously made me very happy and very sad. Happy because, well, look, scores. Sad because, look, not many scores. Now, I do recognize some of these because Charles Ives is one of my favorite composers, like, ever, and I own his 3/4 tone pieces, and I've discussed Ivan Wishnegrodsky on this channel in the past, Harry Parch I am vaguely familiar with because I've got this book I've been meaning to read. And I just kind of enjoy Ben Johnson's string quartets. You know, they're interesting. So as we've gone along on this little tour we're taking together, I've gotten to the point where I'm kind of letting what looks interesting lead me to the next spot. On this page alone, I learned a lot of strange but interesting things. Did you know one of the composers on here invented what is essentially a slide whistle bottle called the Utterbot? And while just exploring links to scores, I've been stumbling upon new music to listen to. You know, one composer on here has a link to a just intonation string quartet, and knowing Ben Johnson's work, I decided to take a listen. But while I couldn't find that work specifically, the rabbit hole it drew me down led me to his 3.5-hour suite for 3 retuned, computerized pianos, which has been a listening experience. And I'll link the playlist to that as well. I don't think it's the whole suite, but it's definitely a good representation of them. Now, one thing I did notice on this page was that there are a fair number of dead links. Not the hardest thing to get around, but, you know, simply Google what you're looking for in attempt to find it. But it did lead me to the fun discovery that there is a page dedicated to listing which pages have dead links, which I thought was just kind of funny. But I want to keep this little tour of ours moving along, and I don't want to get too far into the weeds, so if y'all are interested, you'll have a little something to explore yourself. The next big spot on the sidebar for our purposes is the projects section. Here we've got links to different projects in the microtonal world, such as microtonal organizations, microtonal festivals and events, microtonal record labels, microtonal media, publishing, archives, instrument-focused projects, mini-initiatives on this wiki, and sisters to microtonality. You know, the only issue I had with this page is that as I went to explore some of these links, particularly the instrument ones, I just kept running into dead links. And I know this isn't the fault of the wiki. Some of these projects have probably changed websites, or even just been taken down since their addition to this list. But I was a little sad to see these projects that I was interested in just weren't there when I went to look at them. Now, in deep dives like this, the one thing I really enjoy is exploring the community around these projects. With the music notation project, you know, I kind of got to see how they exist in their day-to-day life, per se, by observing the forum and how that's consistently updated and how people talk in that. And I wanted to do that yet again with this deep dive. Returning to our good friend the sidebar one last time, we'll see a section titled Connect with 3 links. These are the XA Facebook group, the XA Discord, and the XA IRC chat. XA all standing for Xenharmonic Alliance. And I took a little time to just take a poke around in each, and kind of get an idea of what was going on. First up was the Facebook group, mostly because it was first on the list. And the thing is pretty active, alright. There were posts as recent as 5 hours old, there was plenty of activity going on, people were sharing projects, having discussions, promoting instruments that they were building, asking questions, all kinds of things. It was neat. Next up was the XAIRC chat. Now, I might just be too young to know what an IRC chat really is, because I have no clue what was happening here. I didn't see anything going on here, actually, so that probably didn't help. I sat there for a while, kind of just waiting to see if anything came up at all, but I decided it was probably best to move on to something I understood a little better, which would be the last little section of the community here. When clicking on the link to the XA Discord, you're brought, in the usual style, to a Discord invite for the Xenharmonic Alliance Discord server. After accepting, I was placed into the announcements channel, so I got a bit of a quick history of some recent changes in the Discord. Speaking of history, so far as I can tell, the Discord server was founded in 2021, and currently boasts 1,728 members. And after figuring that out, I went to introduce myself in the introductions channel, you know, let everyone know why I was here, and then went to take a look around. While doing that, I felt it would be best to start with the rules, because that can give us a good gauge of what a place is like. To be honest, it's pretty basic stuff. Be nice, no racism, keep the non-music stuff in the non-music channels. Real typical for any of these kind of servers dedicated to a specific topic or similar. And from here, I just kind of jumped around to whatever caught my interest. So I'll try to give a bit of a summary of what I found interesting. First up, the Dank Scales Bruh channel. It's essentially a collection of scales that people keep posting and sharing, but the name of the channel was pretty gold, so I had to go take a look at it. Following that is the Composition Theory channel, which they bill as the type of theory that 12 EDO people think of when they hear music theory, but Zen. And I'll admit, right off the bat, I'm kind of a theory guy sometimes. I really enjoy learning about theory so that I can apply it practically in my own compositions. That being said, trying to read some of this, because it was kind of a conversation in progress, was over my head. It seemed to be very in-depth discussion, with a lot of conversation about creating terminologies to describe specific functions in different systems, as each user in the conversation was essentially creating their own theories to use in their writing. In fact, one user's theories were so in-depth that they were writing multiple pages on the wiki itself to describe the different sections of it. I did take a small look at these, and they were pretty interesting, to be quite honest. And by now, you can probably assume I had to check out the notation channel. So of course, I did. In here, the people were pretty passionate about their notation concepts. Like, I read several essays in this channel. And I saw a few graphics and images, and even some neat transcriptions of Xenharmonic music. Next up, I want to highlight the Beginner Help channel, because this is their place for beginners to ask questions and receive answers. From my look through this channel, there's all kinds of interesting questions being asked, and all kinds of people in the community seem to be helping out, answering questions and problem solving. Lastly, I'll highlight the forum. It's a collection of threads on specific topics, as forums usually are, so it's a little easier to keep track of what the conversation is and what's going on. I particularly enjoyed reading the thread on MuseScore and microtonality, because, as we all know, I'm a bit of a notation nerd, and digging into specifics like this about notation software and how it can be improved was just bonkers fascinating. They had like a 23-page technical proposal and everything. It even had an appendix and keywords. That's dedication. To sum up my little look around the community, around the Xenharmonic Wiki, I am pleasantly surprised by how active it is. I was overjoyed in my deep dive on the music notation project about how active that forum was, and they're not even half as active as this community. Between the Facebook page and the Discord, I saw dozens of people interacting on a daily basis, essentially building new concepts of music from the ground up. They're discussing theoretical concepts, mathematical justifications, philosophical considerations, software creation, instrument building, and doing all of this while creating fascinating music the whole time. I really enjoyed my little look into this community. And that wraps up my exploration of the Xenharmonic Wiki, discussing hundreds of tuning systems, a lot of math, and plenty of theoretical concepts, surrounded by a community that's passionate and interested in what they're doing. I thought this exploration into the Xenharmonic Wiki was a fun time overall, and I look forward to what I'll find here in the future. If something you've seen has interested you, I of course invite you to check it out yourself. I kind of skimmed over a fair number of things in this exploration because I want to leave some mystery for you, the viewer, to go explore on your own. And if you find something interesting, come back here, tell me about it in the comments, tell everyone else about it in the comments. Share the wealth, share the knowledge. And if you've enjoyed this deep dive, feel free to like, subscribe, stick around on the channel, and be notified the next time I do another one on a similar, interesting, or helpful resource that I come across. Feel free to tell me what you thought about the stuff I talked about today, or recommend any future resources to discuss. And if you're one of the people who's active in the wiki and the community, give me your thoughts as well. I'd love to hear what you thought and how well I represented your community. And that's all. So thanks. I'll see you next time.